And their questions are, why would God allow it? And what is happening in my life? And why would I be in the middle of this? You see, everyone who had read this letter in Rome in that time, everyone who was reading it, if they had a child who was blind, they would be led to believe that it was because they had sin in their life and it was their fault. If they lost a job, or if a deal had gone wrong, or if they'd been conquered by another people group, they would be convinced that it was their fault. I know that we don't do that up here, but we do that down here. And maybe if I just believed more, maybe better things would happen in my life. Maybe if I tried harder to love Jesus more, I didn't make that mistake, these things wouldn't be happening in my life. I need you to understand. Becoming a Christ follower, that giving your life over, it doesn't fix everything. We want it to. The moment that you do that, it does not take away all of the troubles of your life. But here's what it does do. It shifts your perspective. When we allow it to, this life that we've been invited into, it shifts our perspective. Paul, after this list, he walks a little bit further into it as to what he invites us into. He shows us this as he quotes this famous passage in Psalm 44. So verse 36 says this: "As it is written, for your sake we face death all day long. We are considered as sheep being led to the slaughter." You ever felt like a sheep being led to the slaughter? What's he talking about? This unknowing, no matter what you're doing, just wandering through life. You ever felt like you were just wandering through life, just trying to get through the day? A sheep being led to slaughter. You ever feel like your life was out of control? That sheep doesn't get to go where it wants, it's just being led there. Paul doesn't leave us there. Continue to read in verse 37. And actually, verse 37 is where I want to sit with us. Verse 37 is where Paul gives us a glimpse, truly, of what we're invited into. He says, no. Right after he says, lambs being led to a slaughter, he says, no. In all these things, we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. Did you catch that? I'll read it again. No. In all these things, we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. In all of these things, that's what he says, right? In the midst of all of the difficulty and all of the garbage and all of the hardship, in the midst of all of these things, we are what? More than conquerors. That's incredible. And I have to be honest with you, I don't live in that enough. A lot of times, I live in this whole thing like, in all these things will be fine. In all of these things, everything really sucks. In all of these things, I guess I'll try harder. No. In all of these things, you will be more than conquerors. That word conquerors is an incredible word, especially for the audience he was speaking to in the moment. Let's pretend, I love doing this with my kids, so we're going to do it together. Let's pretend that we're all sitting and we are in the church in Rome. And this letter of Paul's is being read over us, because that's what would have happened. The church in Rome, they knew what it felt like to conquer. Rome knew what it was like to win. Rome took so much land and so many people. They were conquerors by every definition, Rome. This word being in this letter is fascinating because of that. In fact, in Rome, the city of Rome, there were special gates that only the conquerors could walk in through. Only. Oh, you're walking through those gates? You must have conquered something. Oh, yeah? Like, get out of here. You're not allowed that gate. Conquerors only. And every single time that someone would come through, the city would erupt. New land for us. More territory, more power. Those people are our people now. Rome, they knew what it was like to conquer. I don't think we're that different. I think that in this room, that you have an understanding of what it means to conquer, to win. You see, our conquerors today, they're a little different than maybe the conquerors of Rome. Our conquerors today are the innovators, the ones who can draw a crowd, the beautiful people, the ones that can dunk a ball. Our conquerors are the ones who can draw a crowd, who make the money. Our conquerors have taken over our social media feeds. Our conquerors are everywhere. And we know what it's like to be around conquerors, to be around winners. In fact, I remember growing up, I remember that my dad, because it's not like some stranger, okay? My dad used to tell me that second place was the first loser, son. Don't get second. Second place, first loser. Don't celebrate that. We understand that in our culture, that losing is unacceptable. We've made it that way. We will do anything to win. Did you notice that I left something out? Here's what's really, really beautiful about that particular verse. In that particular verse, he does not say that we will become conquerors, does he? Paul does not say that you will become conquerors through him who loved us. He doesn't say that. No. In verse 27, he says, no, you will become what? More than conquerors. Whoa. That's fascinating. How do you more than conquer something? How do you become more than the best? I am more than the winner. How do you do that? Is it actually possible, or is Paul a nut job? He is a nut job, but for this verse particular. The craziness of that statement. You will be more than conquerors. What does it mean? There's this passage of time right after Easter, so right after the resurrection. Now, in churches, we've gotten really good at this. We've gotten incredibly good at celebrating Christmas and Easter. And then now, like Ash Wednesday is coming back in vogue. Like, that's a cool thing now. So you'll see, like, everyone's doing it, and it's incredible. We celebrate those two things well. There's this passage of time from Easter, the resurrection, that moves all the way into the day of Pentecost that I have become fascinated with. And I believe that in this period of time, that Jesus gives us an incredible example of what it means to be not a conqueror, but more than a conqueror. And so this period of time, historically, it is called Eastertide. And I have to be true. I graduated with a degree in Bible, and I wrote a 50-page paper on the canonization of the New Testament, and I had never heard of Eastertide. So don't feel bad if that's you. The season of Easter, these 50 days, they believed that Jesus, the Messiah, was going to conquer everything. You can imagine what it was like when they saw him on a cross. The Israelites they knew what it was like not to conquer, but to be conquered. They believed fully that the Messiah was going to come and set them free, break the chains. And they put him in a tomb. Roll the stone in front of him. Man. Do you imagine being part of that early movement? See, we get to cheat. You know the end of the story, right? For these followers, many of them went back to where they were before. They pretended they didn't even know who Jesus was. They locked themselves in rooms so that no one could find them. And again, when I first read this, I'm like, what a punk. Like, Jesus, right? And you're going to lock yourself in a room? But then that's because I'm cheating. I know the end. We know that 3 days later, he rises from the grave. And in this 50-day period of Eastertide, he could have raised up an army, rode into the city. He could have dashed the leaders that were there, the powers that were. He could have done so many things. I mean, imagine being on the other side of that. Like, whoa, didn't we just kill you, dude? Okay, you win, right? Like, he could have conquered. In every sense of the word, could have conquered. It's not what he does. In those 50 days, he goes and he encourages his followers. He finds Peter. Peter, who denied him, swore he wouldn't, denies him. Where does he find Peter? He finds Peter back where he found him the first time, back on a fishing boat. That dude followed Jesus for a couple years and went back home. Thought it was over. We lost. Better go back, make some cash. We see that he finds Thomas. We know Thomas as doubting Thomas. Thomas has all of these people coming to him, telling him about the experiences they had with the risen Jesus. And Thomas says, nah, the only way I'm going to believe it is if I can see and touch his wounds for myself. So Jesus meets him in a locked room, mind you, and says, all right, dude, touch. Thomas believes. Raises up these leaders of the faith to do incredible things in the New Testament church. Paul, on which you are the rock on which I will build my church. It's incredible. The dude was fishing. Yet, Jesus, in those moments, he shows us. He says, you thought you were done. You thought the story was over. You thought all of these hardships and all of the negativity and all of the war and all of the things that were happening in your life, you thought that was the end, but I'm not done yet. There's more to come. I'm not done with you yet. Get off that fishing boat. We've got things to do. Jesus models this idea of being more than a conqueror by avoiding the world's definition of conquering altogether. And one of the largest movements in human history comes, and no sword is raised. The way that we view conquering has to be shifted. Our understanding today of what it means to conquer has to be shifted. You need to understand that when difficult things happen in your life, and they will, in the midst of the hardest seasons that you may ever experience, you serve a God who loves you so much that he refuses to leave you alone. In fact, he loves you so much that he sends his son to die in your place to have a relationship with you. What? In the midst of all of the turmoil, we have a God who is for us. And because of that, we are more than conquerors. Do you hear me? What I want you to do is I want you to think about your coming week. I want you to think about the things that are on the way. I want you to think about that doctor's appointment. To think about that family member, that job interview, that disciplinary time. I want you to understand in the midst of that, you are not alone. God is for you. And because of that, who can be against you? Let's pray together. Father, I'm thankful for each of the people in this room, for our opportunity to sing songs about your power and to live in the midst of that here today. God, I pray that we take that with us everywhere we go, that in our jobs, in our families, in our schools, in our neighborhoods, that we walk in the confidence and in the peace. We serve a God who is for us.